Coming up on this week's edition of NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen.
We'll get an update from NCBA President Marty Smith. Plus, we'll tell you about the beef industry's new long-range plan and how it aims to grow beef demand.
And now, NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen.
Hello and welcome to NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen. I'm Russell Nemitz. Well, every summer, members of the National Cattlemen's Beef Association get together to set policy for the organization. And while this year's event looked a little bit different, over 500 cattle producers and industry stakeholders met either in person, adhering to strict protocols, or virtually to discuss some of the most important issues our industry has recently faced. Kevin Ochsner spoke with NCBA President Marty Smith about the outcomes of this meeting.
And joining us now is NCBA President Marty Smith with an update from our summer business meeting. Marty, thanks for joining us today.
Good morning, Kevin. Thank you.
You know, you were just here in Colorado about a month ago with the summer business meeting, and I'm curious, why is the work at the summer business meeting so important to the beef cattle industry? And maybe you can tell us just a few of the key outcomes from this year's meeting.
Yes, our NCBA summer business meeting, and it is our most important business meeting. Our convention, we have a lot of business to conduct there. We have a lot of other things going on with our trade show, with our various social functions, etc. So the summer meeting is really our time to come together and work on resolutions, to work on policy. This year, in addition to some key policy considerations, we updated and renewed and put into place a new long-range plan for NCBA, and really it's a beef industry long-range plan that will also be utilized by CBB in our promotion, research, etc., work through the checkoff. So it is a very important meeting, and we made the decision a few months ago that despite the issues with COVID, we really needed to come together in person. We've done a lot of virtual meetings, we've done a lot of conference calls, but nothing has the same impact, particularly to get people to work together, that seeing one another in person does. That's how we conduct our business, and so we made that decision to move forward.
And tell me this, what are some of the policy priorities that NCBA is planning to work on as we move into the fall?
The big issue at our mid-year meeting, of course, was live cattle marketing. And with the outbreak of COVID, even before that, with the Holcomb fire last summer, we saw some real disparity between the value and the price of boxed beef and what we were getting for our cattle. And that just really was exacerbated this spring with our marketplace. Really critical time for cattle producers all over the country. So our live cattle marketing group has been working on a lot of different options, a lot of different thoughts about what we can do as an industry to correct that and to see more value out of our cattle. So that was one of the key things that we really focused on at mid-year.
So Marty, tell us, how has NCBA made a difference for beef cattle producers over the last 5 months during this COVID-19 pandemic?
From the very outset of the pandemic, NCBA's initial focus was on keeping our supply chain going. Packing plants were being closed, transportation trucks were being stopped, and we knew that we had a lot of fat cattle that needed to go to market. But we knew, too, that we had a responsibility to help feed this country. And we certainly saw the response to that for our consumers early on in the pandemic when, you heard and you saw the grocery shelves emptied of beef. We got great pictures of the beef all gone off the grocery shelf. All of the fake meat, all of the alternate proteins are still there. And we wanted to make sure, we needed to make sure, and we did make sure that continued. I sent a letter to President Trump in March, asking for the executive department's assistance with this. 6 hours later, we had a response back from the president. 2 days later, I was on the phone with President Trump, then with Vice President Pence and Secretary Perdue as we talked about ways to accomplish that. That led to an executive order from President Trump directing our packing plants and to stay open. And with that, we were able to keep that supply chain moving. Now it's backed up significantly due to slowdowns, et cetera. We're working through that now, but that was one of the big things. Next big thing we did was to go to Congress and get the CFAP program in place that helped with some direct payments to all cattle producers all over the U.S. And we're continuing to work on some of those elements as well. So it's been a very busy time. Certainly not the things that necessarily we planned on doing before this, but we've responded very diligently and we've accomplished quite a lot with this.
Well, clearly we've had our fair share of challenges this year as a society and certainly as cattle producers. Any closing comments or messages to cattle producers as we move into the fall?
Hopefully we're seeing some, the marketplace is starting to come back some. We've built up a tremendous backlog of fat cattle. That's been projected even starting back as early as April, as those plants were being closed or being slowed down. We're starting to get rid of some of that backlog, and we're doing it through the normal course of business. So hopefully that's going to lead to some better prices. We still don't know. A lot of the country started to open back up and then shut down again. That's going to be crucial to what we all do. The election is the other big thing for all of us right now. As we move into this election season, we've got a lot on the line. So we will be working a lot with that. By the way, we continue to work very hard on the transportation issue with hours of service. There's just a lot of things going on in Washington and elsewhere that NCBA continues to really focus on.
Very good. Marty, thank you for that update, and thank you for your continued leadership in this challenging time. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you, Kevin.
Now, also at the summer business meeting was the official introduction of the beef industry's new long-range plan. Cattlemen to Cattlemen reporter Brian Baxter has more on this important roadmap that's designed to help the beef industry navigate the next 5 years.
Whether you're driving cattle to a working pen or taking a potload of calves off the ranch, you have to know where you're going and have some idea of how you're going to get there. And if you can figure out the most efficient way to get the job done, then you're money ahead. Those fundamental ideas fit right in with the new long-range plan, which sets goals and a path forward for the U.S. beef industry from 2021 to 2025. The 5-year plan has 6 core strategies. These include driving growth in U.S. beef exports and growing consumer trust in beef production. Also, to develop better business models to improve price discovery and value distribution across all industry segments. In addition, the plan aims to promote and capitalize on the multiple advantages of beef, such as beef's role in a healthy and sustainable diet. Another core strategy is to improve the business and political climate for beef, such as working for policies that defend beef's product identity and that protect and promote grazing on public lands. And the plan calls for efforts to safeguard and cultivate investment in beef industry research, marketing, and innovation. These core strategies aim to support a vision of making beef the protein of choice for consumers around the world. I'm Brian Baxter reporting for NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen.
Joining us now with a closer look at the long-range plan is Kim Brackett, the chair of the long-range plan task force and an Idaho cow-calf producer. And Kim, first of all, let's talk a little bit about how the long-range plan was developed and who was actually involved.
Sure, Russell. The long-range plan is funded every 5 years by the Cattlemen's Beef Board, the Federation of State Beef Councils, and the Policy Division of NCBA. The officers of those organizations appoint a task force that is responsible for developing this 5-year industry-wide plan. This task force for the 2025 plan consisted of 15 individuals from out the industry. They represented every segment. We had folks from seed stock all the way through packing and processing. We also had a representative from the dairy industry, animal health, and academia. And I think it's important to know that these folks were unbelievably committed to this project. I was blown away by their intelligence, they are so articulate about our industry, and it was a true honor to serve with each of them.
I bet it was. Maybe explain what the value is of having a plan like this in place for the U.S. beef cattle industry.
Well, I think it's important to understand that this is a guiding document. It's a roadmap, if you will, for the industry over the next 5 years. I think one of the most important parts to understand is that during the development of this plan, our task force spent countless hours reading stacks of information and researching numerous issues. Then we discussed those issues at length with experts from both inside and outside of industry. We talked to experts on the production side as well as experts on the consumer side. And then they shared with us, based on their expertise, what challenges and opportunities they believe industry will face over the next 5 years, and the best way to position the U.S. beef industry to capitalize on the opportunities and to tackle the challenges.
So with that said, in your view, what are some of the most critical priorities in this new plan?
Well, I hesitate to pull out just a few critical priorities, but I would highlight that this long-range plan has 4 industry objectives, and those I think are of critical importance. The first objective is beef demand. The 2025 long-range plan builds upon decades of work that the checkoff has done on behalf of U.S. beef producers. Building beef demand remains foundational to the success of our industry and will certainly continue to be a critical priority. The second objective is value capture. This objective focuses on the creation of new business and marketing models that capture more value for our product. This objective encourages industry to focus on more balance in the system between the national cow herd size and packer capacity. The task force is concerned that it's going to be increasingly difficult for current producers to manage profitable operations or new producers to enter the business unless a type of balance is achieved and new business models are developed. The third industry objective is sustainability. The environmental footprint of our industry continues to be a leading concern for consumers, and this plan addresses sustainability both at the production level to measure, document, and improve sustainability, and at the consumer level to increase our messaging of factual data to consumers. The fourth objective is traceability. This plan builds upon the previous work of the long-range plan when a feasibility study was conducted on traceability. And the result of that study clearly indicated that there was a need for an animal disease traceability system. The long-range plan encourages industry to take the next step and make traceability a reality.
Kim, as we begin to wrap up, what else would you want your fellow beef cattle producers to know about this new long-range plan and the effort to continually build on beef demand itself?
Well, I think one of the things that would be important to note is that this is an industry-wide plan. So that means that there are some strategies that are quite obviously in the checkoffs domain and others that NCBA's policy division may tackle. But there are also initiatives in here that may require for-profit companies or other stakeholders to grab onto and work over the next 5 years. And finally, this plan provides opportunities where individual producers can step up and be involved. So I encourage your viewers to engage with this plan on their own operation or through a local organization and join the effort to strategically improve our industry over the next 5 years.
Well, as always, we appreciate you taking a little bit of time and joining us here on Cattlemen to Cattlemen from your ranch there in Idaho.
Oh, thank you for having me, Russell. I appreciate it.
If you want to read the full beef industry long-range plan or even learn more about the members of the task force themselves that help to determine these very important industry objectives, just visit the website beeflongrangeplan.com. Well, up next here on Cattlemen to Cattlemen, we'll see how U.S. beef exports are doing and also share an update on NCBA Trade Policy Priorities.
Grass is the center of our universe. We've got to have a grass program that we can count on and plan on. That's what we need to sustain us, to keep us growing, to keep us prospering.
Join the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. NCBA is working every day to defend your interests in Washington, D.C. And there are big benefits to being a member. You'll get news you can use in the National Cattlemen and policy updates from Beltway Beef, plus big discounts from John Deere and more great partners. Join now. Call 866-233-3872 or sign up online at ncba.org.
Welcome back. Well, the COVID-19 pandemic has certainly had a negative impact on a lot of things here of late, including U.S. beef exports. Here's Cattlemen to Cattlemen reporter Brad Beulah with a closer look at the latest numbers.
The USDA reports that U.S. beef exports so far this year are down 9% from a year ago, with sharply lower shipments in both May and June. And the value of U.S. beef exports in the first half of 2020 dropped 10% below a year ago, totaling just over $3.6 billion. The top foreign markets for U.S. beef are Japan, Korea, and Mexico. U.S. beef exports to Japan have been worth more than $985 million so far this year, and that's down about 2% from last year. The USDA reports that exports accounted for just over 13% of total U.S. beef production in the first half of this year, with an average beef export value equal to just over $300 per head. I'm Brad Beulah reporting for NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen.
So what are some of the opportunities and trade policies that could impact U.S. beef export demand for the rest of the year? Kent Backus, NCBA's Senior Director of International Trade and Market Access, discusses those factors in this week's Beltway Beef Spotlight.
While the first half of 2020 was pretty rough on many of us in the beef and cattle industry, the back half of 2020 is looking to be much more promising, as we see the implementation of the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement, the implementation of Phase 1 of the China agreement, as well as growing markets in both Japan and Korea. We could see a lot of gains on the back half of 2020. And as we transition from Asia, we're looking at new opportunities in Europe. As many of you know, we do have a duty-free U.S.-specific quota to the European Union, but we're also looking at new opportunities in the United Kingdom. As many of you know, we are in the middle of trade negotiations with the UK. They are looking for new trade partners as they've left the EU, and we look to be a great trade partner with them as we move forward. But we still have many obstacles to overcome, and that's going to be the focus of the National Cattlemen's Beef Association for the next few months, as we not only discuss the tariff barriers, the very high tariffs we will face in the UK unless they're removed, we also have to focus on all of the non-tariff barriers. Remember, this is a market that's lived under the European Union for the last 40 years, and so science is not a strong basis of their trade. So we have to have very frank conversations with them and really show them that science-based and rules-based trade is the best way to go.
Now, if you'd like to stay up to date on all the key issues as well as events out of Washington, D.C., become a member of the NCBA. When you join, you'll get the Beltway Beef newsletter emailed directly to you every week with the latest news from Washington, D.C., as well as insights from NCBA staff who pound the pavement every single day on Capitol Hill working on your behalf. To join, just call 866-233-3872 or visit the website ncba.org. Still to come here on Cattlemen to Cattlemen, we've got an in-depth look at how NCBA's policy-making process starts with cattle producers at the local and state level. That story when we return, so stay with us.
In the world of cattle vaccines, when you see fewer reactions, you'll notice healthier cattle and higher profits too. Because sometimes good protection is about what you don't see. Protect your productivity with cattle vaccines from Merck Animal Health. Proven to cause fewer reactions. You'll like what you see. Our trusted portfolio is just one more way Merck Animal Health works for you. Talk to your veterinarian and visit cattlefriendlyvaccines.com to learn more.
Welcome back to Cattlemen. Well, earlier in our show, we heard about the recent policy set during the summer business meeting. Now let's dig a little bit deeper into how that policy actually gets made. NCBA takes a lot of pride in being an organization where policy begins at the state and local level. Matt Fleck has a look at this important process.
NCBA policy begins and ends with cattle producers in their county and state organizations. So when Oregon producers were concerned about the potential for problems with beef labeling, they got together and addressed it.
We had some producers from Harney County that wanted to bring a resolution forward because they were concerned that beef was being as little as just repackaged and then labeled as product of the United States.
The issue and concern was mislabeled product that had product of the USA on it, and whether that was verified product, where it was actually from the USA or from another country or what it was. And that's where we all started.
It was an important enough issue that we brought that forward to the NCBA, the summer business meeting in 2019, to the International Trade Committee. And at that point, frankly, we got a fair little amount of pushback from even before the committee meeting, and there were a lot of people that were concerned, what's this going to do as far as international trade ramifications? Is this going to be a WTO issue? And it was a little bit of an uphill swim to get people to understand this is not a cool thing. This is just, if you're going to label it, we want it to be right.
As a result of the discussion on beef labeling in NCBA's International Trade Committee, a working group representing all industry sectors was formed to dig deeper into the issue. Their directive? To report back to the committee at the annual Cattle Industry Convention on their findings.
So for the International Trade Committee, we were tasked with investigating some concerns about transparency in labeling. For a while, some producers have been concerned that foreign product was being brought to the United States and relabeled or mislabeled as a product of the U.S. And so we were tasked with looking into this and finding out if this is an issue, and if so, what can the NCBA do to address it?
We did have producers from all over the country and from all sectors of the industry as well. There's cow-calf guys and feedlot guys and packing house guys and auction yard guys. And, everybody was involved in that, and everybody had really good input. And the being able to look at this issue from a 360-degree angle was really important for making sure that it was going to be an outcome that worked for all of the sectors. Because as a cow-calf guy, I don't know what a feedlot guy is going through, and it was important to have all of that so that we could come up with a product that really worked for the industry.
This kind of showed me the importance of our grassroots mentality within NCBA. We have to have this grassroots. It has to come from our local, state associations on up, and this is what it did. And I really thank Oregon for bringing this to our attention. From our research from USDA, we found that there was a problem. If a product was processed in the United States and had a USDA process label on it, it could slap that product of USA label on the product. So we knew we had a problem.
It was our job to engage directly with USDA, to engage with the retail sector and with the rest of the supply chain, just to get a better idea of what is going on. What we found is that there are some instances where some labels are questionable, but we still don't know the extent of the problem, and so that was one of the things we wanted to look into is to find out, is this isolated or is this a much larger issue? But even with that, the working group decided that NCBA needs to engage directly with USDA and find out what we can do to make sure that any of that product that carries a product of the USA label is verified. At the same time, we have international trade obligations that we have to respect. And we don't want to do anything that could potentially violate the WTO and trigger retaliation. And so this is a very sensitive issue. It's something of importance, and that's why it was such a priority for the International Trade Committee.
And the solution we came up with was to have, if it has a product of USA or any other description of origin on it, that it goes through a verified process. And we already have that verified process within AMS. It's called PVPs, and that's where we ended up. Our policy proposal, and Oregon is going to bring its proposal back up, and it's going to state that we now want, if it's a product of origin label, a voluntary label, we want to know some type of verification program using our verification system we already have in place with AMS.
Today's meeting was a success because it not only gave staff further direction, but it also sent a clear message of what NCBA's policy is, and that is NCBA is going to support voluntary labels, but we want to make sure that they're verified. We want to make sure that there's truth in the labeling, and that our beef that we do such a good job raising is properly marketed, and that no one else can claim to be a product they're not, and that is U.S. beef. So this is a success for NCBA. It's evidence of the grassroots direction and the producer-led framework of the organization.
The goal of NCBA has always been and will always be to provide a path for grassroots voices to be heard and policy to be formed based on industry collaboration. This process allows NCBA staff to carry out the directives of its members.
I am very comfortable with the process that we went through here. You know, we completely reworked the language of the resolution, but what we're getting here today is a product that is successful in my mind. It addresses the issue that Oregon producers are concerned about. It addresses the issues that all of these grassroots producers, because after Oregon brought it up, NCBA leadership went around the country and said, what are you guys hearing about this? And everybody was worried about this. It was a big deal, and it's a perfect example in my mind of how these grassroots issues come up from a county association to a state association to the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, and it's now policy, and it's not only policy, but we're actively working and being successful at implementing the changes at a regulatory level that are going to make our guys more successful.
I think, coming from a small community in Virginia that has a voice, my voice starts at the local level, through the state level, and national. If it didn't have that grassroots, I wouldn't be involved with it.
As someone who's worked for NCBA for a number of years, I can tell you that it's days like this that really drive home the meaning of what it is to work for a grassroots-led organization. We get our direction straight from the members. When they see a problem, they bring it forward, ask us to engage, and we do. And so I think today's actions only solidify the importance of NCBA.
From the NCBA International Trade Committee meeting in San Antonio, I'm Matt Fleck for NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen.
If you'd like to support the beef industry, why not become an NCBA member? By doing so, you'll be sustaining the work of NCBA in defending and advocating for the cattle industry in Washington, D.C. And it's easy to do. Just call 1-866-233-3872 or visit the website ncba.org. Still ahead on Cattlemen to Cattlemen, we'll head to Kansas and check out how one stocker operator uses John Deere equipment to help ensure he's putting up the highest quality hay for his operation. That story when we return.
They're here, they're hungry, and they can't be stopped with ivermectin alone. Add Safeguard when you deworm your cattle to take out resistant parasites like brown stomach worm, Cuperia, Nematodirus, and others. With 2 dewormers from 2 different classes, you can kill more resistant worms in your cattle, so you don't leave potential on the table. Consult your veterinarian for the diagnosis and treatment of parasitism. Then bite back at safeguardworks.com.
No matter how plentiful your grass may be, as a cattle producer, you know there will be a time when you need supplemental feed to get your cattle through a lean grazing season. That's why so many producers stockpile hay when forage is plentiful. Brian Baxter takes us to Kansas to see how one stocker operator uses John Deere equipment to help provide the hay his operation needs.
On a July morning just after sunrise, Tom Ritchie is watching from afar as his crew rounds up more than 700 head of stocker cattle that have been grazing his family's land over the past few months. This is a typical day in the heart of the Highland Ranch Company's shipping season.
Typically it starts middle of July, July 13th, 14th, 15th, and lasts 3 to 4 weeks typically. We ship 6 days a week, not on Sunday, and we'll ship anywhere from 400 to maybe 1,000 a day. We're primarily a stocker operation. We bring cattle in typically in mid-April and graze them to October. Some of the grazing season is from early or mid-April to mid to end of July, and that's called an early intensive graze. Through the years, we've expanded that. We now have a cow-calf operation here. But most of our cattle are yearlings. We own our own cattle, we also custom graze. The cattle come from all over, from Nebraska, Missouri, a lot from Kansas, western Kansas. We even have some from Mississippi. The custom grazers, many of them have been with us for over 25 years.
Tom's granddad started raising cattle in this area in the 1950s. Tom says his family is blessed to run cattle in this unique part of the world.
The Flint Hills is a great place for stocker animals. First of all, because of the grass. The grass is the best in the world. So these stockers will gain and very good and be very hard and ready to go to the feed yard. So buyers love buying cattle out of the Flint Hills because they do very well on feed as well. But bottom line is the grass. It's the best grass in the world. For 3 months out of the year, there's nothing better.
Even as he's shipping stocker cattle, Tom's crew is also working to stockpile that outstanding forage for the months when grazing won't be available.
We put up about 1,000 round bales of brome a year and prairie hay. Typically, I would rather get a little less hay and higher quality, especially for the yearlings, than more hay and less quality.
Tom and Andy both run a lot of cattle out here in the Flint Hills. Beautiful, beautiful country out here. They've done it for a long time, and one thing that they decided to do too was, instead of farming out their hay operation, they decided, hey, let's get it ourselves. So we got into them with balers, tractors, rakes, and swather, W235 swather, and they started going after it. So they've been doing that for quite a few years now.
Hay season can be challenging, but one of the things that does make it a little easier is we have pretty darn good equipment. Prairie Land, John Deere up out of Emporia has helped us a lot, and they're very good. If you do have a problem, they'll be out here within hours typically to help you fix it. But the equipment rarely breaks down. It goes pretty good.
When they're haying, our guys are on call 24/7. Tom Ritchie making those comments about our service department and what we do for them, Tom and Andy Ritchie, it means the world to us because we really truly want to be there 100%. If there's a way, we're going to find it. We're going to find it. We're going to find a way to get there.
Putting up 1,000 bales each year, as the Ritchie family does, is no small task. But the John Deere round balers available today make it easier to deliver more consistent, high-quality bales.
One thing about our balers, it makes a pretty tight bale, and that's important to us because our hay's kept outside, and so it sheds water better.
For one thing, as you could look at the balers, you see they've got the big tires on them. A lot of potholes, that kind of stuff out in these areas. To keep our equipment running good and very productive, we want to let it float across this ground. These big tires help that float across there. We have wide pickups that can pick up these heavy windrows, and the baler just flat bales.
Because you want that thing to be tight, hold together. 1,500 pound bale is good. We can pick it up with our bale bed. We use a 5-foot wide bale. We can pick it up with a bale bed. We can pick 2 of them up, take them out, unroll them, and the cattle can eat them out in the pasture. That net wrap holds them together. We cut it off. It's quicker than stringing. I mean, it's a lot quicker.
The net wrap has speeded up. You got an 8-second tie. I mean, that speeds you up if nothing else. Plus, it holds well. Our net wrap sucks it tight, holds it tight, and it preserves that hay a lot longer than with twine, actually. And it's very timely. You can move it quicker, and it keeps the edges from wicking. Does a good job.
Beyond the bales, the Ritchie family also appreciates the value they get from the John Deere tractors they use day in and day out.
I tell you, I like John Deere tractors because they're reliable. I'll be honest, I've only had a few others. These have done better than any of them. They get the job done.
In the Flint Hills area, a lot of our producers really appreciate the John Deere tractors. Again, number one, their reliability, comfort and convenience of the cab and the tractor operation alone is a really big one with our consumers. They're feeding cattle, they're baling hay, and they need a simple but reliable, comfortable tractor. Looking to be cool in the summer, and they're looking to be warm in the winter. That's what John Deere has to offer.
I would say over the last 15 to 20 years, we've had a strong relationship with Prairie Land on John Deere in Emporia. Over the last decade, it's really increased as we've acquired more hay equipment.
Yep. When it comes down to it, producers like Tom Ritchie have a lot in common with the John Deere dealers they rely on. Both are counting on the hay and the cattle produced in their part of the world to make their livelihood.
They're feeding the cattle so they can turn around and make a profit from them. They need good quality hay to do it with. The John Deere baler, put net wrap on it, the Flint Hills hay, makes it all happen.
The Stalker's Creed, buy them cheap, keep them alive, make them big, sell them high. So, yeah, if all those things work, we make money every year. There's always one of those that fall out. Hopefully you still make money. At least enough to feed the kids, huh?
That's good insight from those who make their living on the land. In the Flint Hills of Kansas, I'm Brian Baxter reporting for NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen.
And you can find out more about John Deere tractors as well as their hay equipment by visiting their website at johndeere.com. And don't forget, there are also valuable discounts on John Deere equipment available exclusively to NCBA members. To find out about these money-saving opportunities, just visit ncba.org. Next on Cattlemen to Cattlemen, we'll head to South Dakota for a look at a Fed Cattle Challenge program that's meant to educate as well as encourage another generation of cattle feeders. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
We didn't just design the 6M tractors with you in mind. We designed them with you by our side. The new 6M tractors from John Deere, reimagined by you, for you. With improved visibility, better maneuverability, and more ways to customize, so you get everything you need and nothing you don't. Experience the new 6M at your local John Deere dealer.
Well, developing the next generation of cattle producers is absolutely critical to the long-term viability of the entire U.S. beef cattle industry. In South Dakota, the Cattlemen's Foundation recognized a need to encourage young producers who have an interest in the cattle feeding sector. Cattlemen to Cattlemen's Kevin Ochsner brings us the story.
The South Dakota Cattlemen's Foundation was formed as a way to ensure the long-term viability of South Dakota's beef industry.
Well, the purpose of the South Dakota Cattlemen's Foundation is first and foremost to promote the industry and the mission of our ranchers and producers across the state of South Dakota.
Keeping the industry viable is critical not only locally for producers, but as we take a look at global beef production and the demand for our product, it's really important to have that future secured. So the mission of the foundation is really twofold, both being in education. Educating the consumer that we can have a discussion here locally with, as well as educating the next generation of beef producers in our state. And really both of those metrics we feel like are going to help ensure the viability of our industry long term. We've also have a very vibrant education committee. Those folks, we provide 5 scholarships annually, totaling $15,000 for local students. And then a new component to our education committee is the Fed Cattle Challenge, in which high school and college age students are able to actually physically own cattle in a feed yard and then compete in an educational opportunity for a cash award in that as well.
Starting the Fed Cattle Challenge was not only a way to introduce the next generation of cattle producers to the science and economics of finishing cattle through hands-on participation, but also to help build a stronger fed cattle industry in South Dakota.
The percentage of cattle that are raised in South Dakota versus the ones that are fed here seems to be disproportionately low. If we want to change that, if we want to change that culture and the economic impact that it has in South Dakota, we have to start with better training and creating a culture where that becomes a part of our knowledge base and something that we learn at an early age.
We really want to build up that feeding industry in the state of South Dakota, and it's a need that I think the industry in our state has identified and been working on, but it's a little bit challenging. We have some really good things going on in our state that are favorable to cattle feeding, in that we have a relatively low corn basis. We've got farmer feeders who have basically a captive feed supply, and they need to market that feed through cattle. And so in order to do that, we need people who understand the cattle business end of it so that they can take that pen of cattle, get them to gain and grow and finish and be marketable at the end point. And at the same point in time, we want them to be profitable so they can stay in the business, right? And so we thought that this was a really great way to do that.
I think the next generation is obviously very important in South Dakota because we are so sparsely populated outside of 3 or 4 metro areas. And I use the metro area term pretty loosely. And so to keep our industry vibrant and to keep our industry viable in South Dakota is obviously the most important thing to cattle production. But we also really see it as a huge benefit to community survival in a very rural state.
Participants in the Fed Cattle Challenge had ownership of 3 head of cattle and were given an in-depth look at all aspects of the cattle feeding industry.
We wanted to be able to give young people the experience of looking at what it takes to really run a feed yard and all of the things that they have to take into consideration when they're doing that, because we really want to generate the next generation of feedlot owners and operators, because when you look at the people who are willing to do that, I think that pool is relatively small. And then the knowledge, where do they get that really to start into it? And so all of the students that were in the program owned 3 head of cattle in that particular feedlot pen. And so then they got the billing information every couple of weeks to look at and see, this is what it really takes to own these cattle, and these are the management things that we have to think about. You know, we've had students who have maybe a little bit of cow-calf experience or maybe some really limited feeding experience. And so this was able to really give them a broader picture of what the industry looks like. And I think that that was extremely valuable to them. And again, having that experience on their resume for those feedlot owners and operators as they go looking for help, I think will be really a great thing for those students.
At the conclusion of the program, awards were given to the top 4 participants during the South Dakota Cattlemen's Foundation Primetime Gala. Interest from the industry has been positive and will keep the program going strong.
The response to the project has been fantastic, and we asked those students when they were done to give us a little bit of feedback to see if we needed to change direction a little bit or what things that we could refine and do better. And the feedback was just really excellent, that they thought that having that money up front and that stake in the game really made it very real for them. And so that was a really positive thing. And our response by the feedlot owners and managers in the state has also been fantastic. They love to see that there's students who are taking an interest, who are going to have some real world experience, who are going to have a little bit better knowledge of, oh wow, this this is what it takes to manage all of that.
It's great that there's this much excitement and enthusiasm in year 5, but I know that we're building a longer legacy behind this, something that we see multi-generation in the future.
From South Dakota, I'm Kevin Ochsner, reporting for NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen.
Do you want to rewatch an episode of Cattlemen to Cattlemen, or maybe catch up on anything you've missed? If the answer is yes, then just visit our YouTube page. You'll find replays of all of our shows filled with educational segments and producer profiles from around the country. Go to youtube.com/Cattlemen to Cattlemen to check it out. When we return, it's time to check in with the cowboy poet Baxter Black, so stay with us. We'll be right back.
All across the nation, ranchers are feeling the effects of immune system challenges in more than 1 in 5 of their weaned calves. It's a frustrating, costly journey. But help is on the way. Purina starter feeds. Now with RX3 immune support technology, it boosts calves' natural defenses, priming their immune systems from the start. Join the fight and talk to your Purina rep to learn more.
Still looking for entertainment at your county fair or rodeo? Baxter's latest, a continuous 5 hours of Baxter, which is me on film from Johnny Carson, Iowa Public TV. Elko, hang your screen anywhere on the fairgrounds you want a crowd. The barn, the bar, the tent, the 4-H room, even the arena. $125. Baxter Black Cowboy Theater, 800-654-2550, BaxterBlack.com.
Did you know that Prefert makes over 1,000 different farm, ranch, and rodeo items? And now, thanks to Prefert Direct, it's easier than ever before to get access to every item Prefert makes delivered direct to your local dealer. For more information about Prefert Direct, visit us at Prefert.com. Prefert, America's #1 name in farm, ranch, and rodeo.
During calving season, a rancher is often forced to go in and get his wife's help in the middle of the night. This is her story. I slept and dreamed of sunny beaches, seashells, sand, and kelp. I've got her in the calving barn. I'm gonna need some help. The waves were crashing over me. The seagulls dived and ducked. She calved all right all by herself, but Junior's never sucked. I woke to find my husband up and looking woebegone. It'll only take a minute. You can leave your nightie on. Next thing I know, I'm in the barn. It smelled like creosote. I'd pulled on his old overshoes and my old chorin coat. If you'll distract the cow, he said, a little bleary-eyed, I'll try and gather up the calf while she's preoccupied. I tried to make a feeble wave. She didn't take the bait. You gotta jump around a bit. Just climb up on the gate. She charged the panel where I stood. I felt the cracking pine. I leaped and grabbed a rafter like old Tarzan would a vine. The overshoes flew off my feet. I wrapped my legs around and hung there like a 3-toed sloth, my nightie hanging down. The cow was blowing slobbers on my winter lingerie. It soon became a sodden mass, exposed by expose. I tried to save some dignity, but it was fading fast. I felt like a piñata with a bullseye on my person. I was screaming for my hubby when he finally reappeared. The panel lay in splinters and the cow had disappeared. What took so long? I shouted as I dangled overhead. The tears were streaming down his face. He caught his breath and said I dumped the calf and banged my head and tried to race right back, when a momentary vision up and stopped me in my track. A nursery rhyme about a dish that ran away with a spoon, and there, before my very eyes, the cow jumped over the moon. This is Baxter Black from up there.
If you'd like to know more about NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen and have an opportunity to support our effort to create valuable news, information, and education just for cattle producers, then check out our website, cattlementocattlemen.org.
As a stocker operator, your job is to turn forage into profit. With the right implant, you can. Revlor G improves grazing performance for 150 days, the same length as the typical grazing period. And it's dosed for stockers' maturity levels, adding up to an extra 23 pounds. See why Revlor G is the #1 choice in stocker implants at RevlorG.com. A withdrawal period has not been established in pre-ruminating calves. Do not use in calves to be processed for veal.
And welcome back. We're wrapping up this week's show with legacy photos now. These are great shots submitted by our viewers of their daily life on the farm or ranch. Let's take a look. Well, that wraps up this edition of NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen. Thank you so much for spending time with us, and we'll see you again next week right here on RFD TV.